welcome to the first episode of the Mental Hygiene Show. I am Adrita, the host for today and the campaign ambassador for the Mental Hygiene Monday campaign, initiated by Mental Hygiene Monday and powered by the Art Secure. The campaign aims to bridge a gap between the research work done in psychology and general population who can benefit by adapting to simple and practical measures for maintaining mental well-being. Our guest for the day is Dr. Vinay Mishra, a psychologist, a trainer, and professor of psychology. He holds the distinction of being one of the first Indian psychologists to study human behavior in Antarctica as a member of the 20th Indian scientific expedition to the South Pole. He had also been on a scholarship of the Denver International Program to the United States of America to study psychotherapy. Today we are going to talk about looking at the brighter side. Is it wrong? With our honorable guest for the day, Dr. Vinay Mishra, sir. Hello, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Adrita. And I'm glad to be on this platform. And I can see that there are lots of young people and a group that I feel particularly comfortable with. So this wonderful initiative is praiseworthy. So let's go ahead.
All right, sir. So I would like to start by knowing your views on today's topic. Looking at the brighter side, is it wrong?
Okay. Yeah. That's a very relevant question, and we keep hearing it all the time about whether this brightness or this optimism is really worth it and things of that kind, right? Let me begin by saying that we've actually moved on from the time of Freud, where all that we were required to do was to dig up people's past life and look at traumas and tragedies that they have experienced and find out ways through very, very elaborate sessions about helping them cope with it. I think we know much better about how to take care of ourselves at this point of time, where the focus is on the fact that we probably have learned a few things that need unlearning, right? So we are capable of taking charge of our own life if only we look at it in a certain way. So right at the moment, we I can draw an analogy with this rubber band that I have in my hand. And what I'm really trying to say that is that there could be good quality rubber bands and there could be poor quality rubber bands, right? So a poor quality rubber band can probably last a lifetime if rolled over just one sheet of paper. However, when you talk about a good quality rubber band, it can probably be stretched to a much greater extent, but not endlessly. So at any given point of time, when we look at things, there's always an interplay of two factors here. First, the kind of environmental forces that are at work. Some people have unusually high list of problems in their life and our own inherent capability of dealing with these things, right? Quite like the rubber band. Which brings me to this next question that uh, while we do understand that a lot of unlearning is required, uh, we would also want to look at the fact that people who check into hospitals at times may not really be sick people, right? They may just be people who have not learned the right mechanisms, the right coping strategies, and therefore are suffering. So while we talk about not being able to learn coping strategies, we're talking about, what have we really done in terms of equipping the young people in school and college to deal with challenges that we are faced with in life, right? So what do we really understand by happiness or brightness in this particular case? So most of the young people would probably believe that, once you have a job and you have friends or you have a life partner or you have a good relationship or some of these material assets, that's all that is required to be happy. The reality is that it may not actually be so, right? It depends on how you look at it and what you do with it, right? So while we are dealing with issues, let's understand that लाइफ इज पैराडॉक्सिकल, जहां पर एक तरफ हम बात करते हैं जॉय की, वहीं पर हम बात करते हैं सौरव की भी। अगर हम एक तरफ बात करते हैं सक्सेस की एक एरिया में, तो किसी और एरिया में फेलियर के बारे में बात करते हैं। अगर हम ग्रोथ के बारे में भी बात करते हैं किसी चीज की, तो डिस्ट्रक्शन के बारे में भी बात करते हैं। ठीक है। So here is where we really need to look at it from a much more holistic perspective, which basically comes down to this fact that we understand what is not working for us. So the question is, how can I stop doing this unhelpful thing? मैं क्या कर सकता हूं जिससे ये unhelpful चीज को मैं रोक पाऊं? और जहां तक ये ब्राइटनेस के बारे में बात हो रही थी, तो लेट मी गिव यू एन एग्जांपल कि अगर आपका बहुत अच्छा सा ब्यूटीफुल सा गार्डन है, बहुत सारे फ्लावर्स हैं, बड़े ब्यूटीफुल ट्रीज हैं, लेकिन उसमें वीड्स भी लगे हुए हैं, राइट? सो यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू मिस द ब्यूटी ऑफ द फ्लावर्स for just the weeds. Yes, of course, you're going to acknowledge that there are a few dark things there in the form of weeds, which you try to uproot, but you would not miss the complete picture, the beauty, the tranquility of the flowers for just those few weeds. So for me, brightness is about focusing on the larger picture, focusing on things that work for us, focusing on things that make us happy, and to do away with these things that are unnecessary in our own life.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a wonderful explanation of the topic. And as you said, that we should focus on the larger side of our lives, and not only we should look at it with a holistic manner, with a holistic approach, and not just focus on the negative aspects of our life. Now, moving on to the question, sir. How helpful do you think is staying focused on the brighter side? How would you relate this concept with your experience in staying in a isolated place like Antarctica?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a favorite topic of mine. You bring in Antarctica here, and by even drawing a parallel, we are talking about a time that was very difficult for me. So when we talk about the Antarctic expedition, most people believe that, you know, that's elite adventure. However, it is more than that, right? Any adventure has the possibility of terminating it whenever you want. And in the Antarctic expedition, you only come back when the expedition comes back. Of course, the horrors of Antarctica are numerous. For the months that we were there was continuous daylight, no darkness at all. We were about 15,000 kilometers away from here. The fact that we were completely cut off from our families, the fact that there was no access to computers or telephone calls, or even the dietary preferences that we had, made this expedition very most of my questionnaires were structured around stress and work-related stress and familial stress and existential stress and so many other things. However, what really amazed me, and I was so pleasantly surprised with the data that I collected, which was finally submitted to the government, was that we have this inherent ability to retune ourselves, to readjust ourselves, and realign ourselves when we face difficult situations. So when we're talking about brightness, we are looking at something that is maybe, hard to find. However, if you try hard, you definitely can get it. That has been my experience of Antarctica, and that's exactly what has channelized my thinking in favor of brightness. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. So, as you explained that since Antarctica had all day there was daylight and there was no night over there, but still you faced so many adversities, but you realized that in the end it all takes is that we adjust ourselves, and our human capability is to readjust and live with the conditions as they are.
Yeah.
Similarly, brightness is, when we talk about brightness, we also should focus not only on the adversities, but readjust and adapt ourselves to the situations.
Yes.
Moving on to the next question. Does the notion of looking at the brighter side lead people to focus on their good intentions and ignore their hurtful actions?
Okay, that's a very intelligent question. Yeah, I know where it is coming from. There was this professor of mine in the United States, who used to say that if you want to get famous in psychology, focus on the fact that people are worse than what other people might have imagined them to be, right? So focusing on the darker side, focusing on, the pathologies, focusing on behaviors that are absolutely abhorrible, is something that somehow catches more attention and somehow attracts more people than the good aspects of life. What about affection? What about love? What about courage? What about warmth that people would display? That somehow does not really attract so much attention in psychology. And therefore, while you talk about these good intentions and bad intentions, here's where we need to understand that the common psyche is aligned to the fact that uh, we are talking about people who would probably be looking at cues of how human behavior can get worse, right? Read newspaper headlines about rapes, about child abuse, and about other such unlawful activities, and you would find that it really startles people. However, when we talk about the brighter side, we are talking about an overall perspective. We are talking about what are the basic goods in life that we probably need to focus on. And the point still is that when you focus on the bright, only then would you get the positive results, right? If you don't focus on the bright things, where would the positivity, where would the brightness really come from, right? So the focus has to be sharply on the brighter aspects of life. Now, it's more about how you control your attitude rather than bring about changes in other people's behavior. And there is this very small exercise that I think would really answer this question better than giving any more theoretical explanation. And that exercise is called as finding a silver lining, right? Finding a silver line, right? And it's a very short exercise that you can do while you are hearing this video. And it has got something to do with looking back, maybe from today morning or maybe yesterday. Look at that one thing that has gone wrong, right? That one thing that you thought would turn out good, but it really backfired, right? It could be a very simple thing in life, right? Let me give you an example from this morning. I had these two last slices of bread into a toaster, and just then there was this telephone call, and it turned around and started talking. And by the time I got my attention back to the toaster, uh, both the slices were absolutely charred, right? So they were no good. Okay, so yeah, this is an example that happened just this morning. You could probably look back at something that might have happened in a similar way in your life, but do not suppress the negativity there. Do not try to, condone it or say that nothing has happened. Yes, absolutely. Something that you had not planned actually happened at that particular point in time. However, I would also like to invite your attention on what is it that you learned from that? Or drawing a parallel from the example that I just gave you, what is it that I learned from those the morning debacle of these two slices of bread being charred, right? First of all, I think I realized that I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. I was distracted, right? Also, that I probably was talking for too long on the phone when it was not really required. And then I had to tell my wife to prepare something else because those were the two last slices of bread. right? Which she did. So when you draw a lesson even from, these simple mishaps of everyday life, you would figure out that there is optimism, that there is hope, and that there is gratitude, right? So optimism, hope, and gratitude are things that get you to see the picture differently. So while you're talking about, bad intentions and good intentions, let me tell you that, at times our intentions might be really good, but they turn out to be horrible, right? However, there are lessons to be learned from that as well. And while you do look at some positives from what mishap happened, you would still find that there's something that you can latch on to, something that would provide a key towards not repeating the mistake again. Maybe the next time you make a fresh mistake, but you would probably not repeat it. And therefore, that optimism, that gratitude, and that hope is something that outlives the tragedy of the problem. Yeah.
Such beautiful explanation, sir. So, as you said that we should focus on optimism, hope, and gratitude, that we should not only focus on the positive emotions or ignore our negative emotions or ignore our negative actions, but we should acknowledge them, accept them, and face them, which helps us not which helps us to focus on the brighter side with a holistic approach. Moving on to the next question. How do we develop greater mental and emotional resilience without becoming people who put up a fake cheerful facade?
Okay, so about mental and emotional resilience is the question. So how do you develop mental and emotional resilience? Again, a very good question, right? So when you talk about resilience, you're talking about how to restore the normalcy after something negative has happened, right? So how to regain that equilibrium. So long everything goes on well, जब तक सब कुछ ठीक चलता रहता है, तब तो कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं है. प्रॉब्लम तो तब आता है कि जब कोई गड़बड़ हो जाती है, जब कोई अनएक्सपेक्टेड जो है प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है, जैसे कि अभी हमारे इंटरैक्शन के समय यहाँ पर लाइट चली गई, राइट? सो आई मीन दिस वाज अनएक्सपेक्टेड, and then we rejoined again, and for a few minutes there was chaos at my end, and I'm sure you wouldn't have understood why I suddenly disappeared from the screen, right? However, the point is, how quickly do you regain your balance? Most of the times, people talk about resilience as being something that helps you to bounce back to normalcy, right? कि आपको कितना मोड़ा जाता है, जैसे कि रबर को मोड़ा जाता है और फिर आप जो है वो नॉर्मलिसी रिस्टोर कर लेते हैं जैसे ही प्रेशर रिलीज किया जाता है. आई एम नॉट इवन टॉकिंग अबाउट दैट, right? I'm talking about actually crumbling down. I'm talking about fragmenting. I'm talking about complete breakdown, right? So even after a complete breakdown, how do you even grow out of those pieces, right? Those pieces are not worthless, right? You can still restore a lot of things. So how do you put it all together is what emotional and mental resilience is all about, right? Now, how do you do that is the question. So just explaining what it is. But when we're talking about, being resilient, we are basically talking about, people who have greater emotional control, meaning that they would probably not display so much stress when faced with adversity, or would have greater flexibility in their thinking, right? Flexibility in their thinking is likely to facilitate the adjustment that people would have with other people. Also, developing interpersonal relationship is a very, very valuable tool towards developing emotional and mental resilience, right? We all have positive and negative people around us, right? But there definitely have to be people with whom you would have a relationship much deeper than other people. They would be like, your support, quite like, the net that is there in the circus while the trapeze artists do their act from, the ceiling of the circus tent, right? Even the most experienced trapeze artist would probably never go up on, the trapeze without the safety net. Why? Because life is so unpredictable. Anything can happen at any point of time. So people are like that safety net. They are like the ones who would hold you in a moment of crisis. And therefore, it's great to have a working relationship with many people, but it is very essential to have close relationship with people who qualify as your relatives, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, with whom you could discuss things. And I think that is then the key to emotional and mental resilience.
So, to maintain a emotional and mental resilience, people should not only be emotionally equipped or have high emotional quotient, but they should also have greater interpersonal relationships so that when they fall down or they have a breakdown, people can hold them back and they can gather themselves up. Moving
Yeah.
on to the next question. Why is looking at the brighter side the most given advice or suggestion?
Okay. Yes, right. We hear that very often. Look at the brighter side and things of that kind, right? Let me give you a few statistics from our own country so that this question is understood better and people can relate to the answer that I would give to this. Uh, when we talk about a country like ours, before the day ends, you'd be shocked that 300 people would have committed suicide. In a class, and I believe that there are several young people listening to this, in a class of, let's say, 30 people in school or in college, there would approximately be 10 people who get overwhelmed by the stress that they are experiencing in their lives, right? We talk about the fact that there are just about 5,000 psychiatrists in the country, and there are just about 3,000 clinical psychologists. Would you believe that there are just about 42,000 health budget really is allocated to mental health, right? We're talking about a pretty dismal situation, right? We're talking about the fact that uh, if we do not focus on generating awareness, even through platform like yours, if we do not make people look at the brighter side of life, if we do not restore people's faith in their ability to bounce back to normalcy, we would run the risk of too many people falling into the trap of anxiety and depression, both of which are called as the common cold of mental illnesses, right? So while we talk about stress and a lot of stress, let's understand that stress is no disorder. There is no disorder like stress, right? It usually sets the ground for other types of disorders to really blossom, with it being there for a long time, right? So here's where we need to understand that looking at the brighter side becomes very important, because it gives you this very important message of accepting reality as a mix of both good and bad. If you go about life believing that you're going to experience all the right people and all the right circumstances, you would be sadly mistaken that there would be bad instances too. So would we allow ourselves to be shattered by a few people who have not done the right things to us, or who have probably wronged us in some way? No, it's always a mixture of the good and bad. while we restore our belief in the brightness, we would accept this fact as well. Also, to sever the moment, right? I mean, to understand that the journey towards any goal probably should be made as pleasant as the goal itself, right? Otherwise, going to become very heavy and very taxing and tiring, right? So to enjoy the moment is also very, very important. Yet another thing is to learn to live with frustrations, right? So for young people, they believe that as soon as they would get a job, as soon as they would have money, or as soon as they get a loving life partner, that would be an end to practically, every problem that they might have imagined. No, that's not true, right? So the ability to live with frustration becomes absolutely important. And finally, to be able to take care of yourself, to be able to accept yourself is yet another thing that needs to be highlighted. So through platforms like yours, we need to address young people, because generating awareness is the best thing that we can do at this point of time.
Thank you so much, sir. I think the question, your answer made it pretty clear. So we are short in time. So let's move on to the next question, which is the last question. Why
Okay.
is looking at the brighter side associated with positivity and optimism? Why do we use these labels?
Okay. Yeah. So, why do we use this label of positivity and optimism, right? Okay. So, the answer to that is a very, very simple one, and that is because it leads to success, right? That's the simple answer. Yes, I do understand success means different things to different people, right? But when we are talking about positivity and when we are talking about optimism, let's understand that people who have this belief about brightness, this belief about positivity, and a faith in optimism, they are the ones who set higher goals as compared to other people. They are the people who expend greater effort in their journey towards accomplishing these goals. Also, in the face of adversity, these people would not surrender, would not yield, would probably take it beyond a certain limit in order to actually bring the best out of themselves. So finally, we are talking about the quality of life, the meaningfulness of life, the purposefulness of life, and the fact that achievement of goals that go beyond what is it in life for me to actually be extending it to other people is probably the most important thing. And that's why positivity and optimism need to be preserved, nurtured, and also even inculcated very strongly into our culture.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us such descriptive and beautiful answers. So, just summarizing the session, we talked about that looking at the brighter side is not only looking at the positive side, but taking actions so that we can acknowledge our negative emotions and our negative actions and being accountable for what we are facing and what we are doing. Today, thank you for joining us today and sharing your views with us, sir. I'm sure this session would have been helpful for our viewers as well. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much and
much,
thanks.
Adrita, and your entire team for generating this extremely interesting conversation between the two of us.
Thank you so much.